As a whole, the 2016 growing season will end up as the best ever for the country. The overall outputs and average yields for corn and soybeans in the U.S. will break records, according to the agency's November projections. January's annual crop production report will put the final cap on harvest numbers, but as of the latest estimates, Nebraska's corn farmers will harvest the third largest crop in the nation with an average yield of 184 bushels per acre. However, as we discussed during the year, producers battled numerous now familiar diseases and one confirmed for the first time ever in the U.S. Nebraska Extension plant pathologist Tamra Jackson-Ziems joined us recently to discuss how seed corn selection might be able to help growers manage some of those issues. We started by asking for a recap of what they saw in 2016.
Well, we certainly did have quite a few diseases in corn this past year. Some of them were the usual suspects and a few other newer things that people aren't as accustomed to, and it took some people by surprise and in some cases may have impacted yield more than they were expecting to.
So how effective can seed corn selection be in trying to manage these diseases?
Well, in recent years, we've been much more fortunate that our seed companies have identified many more resistant hybrids to some of the major diseases that we have here in Nebraska and elsewhere. And so that gives us an opportunity to select hybrids ahead of time and position them in fields where we know we've had a history of some of these diseases, because the pathogens that cause most of these diseases overwinter, and that guarantees we're likely to see them again if weather conditions are favorable.
Tell me specifically which diseases you can look for or look to manage with seed corn selection.
Well, we do have hybrids that have good resistance to things like Goss's bacterial wilt and blight and gray leaf spot, and now we have resistance to other diseases too, like some of our common stalk rot diseases like anthracnose, and that was a big problem in 2016. As well as now, this is a more recent change, is we have resistance now to some southern rust too, and that hasn't happened historically, and so now we have a better chance of fighting some of these diseases and sometimes reducing input costs.
How effective can variety selection be when it comes to managing rust?
So we had a lot of southern rust in some parts of Nebraska last year. Some of it was quite severe and came on very quickly there at the end of the season. Well, rust pathogens don't overwinter on corn in Nebraska or in the temperate climates, and so they're not predictable in where they're going to develop because the spores have to blow in every year. But fortunately, we do have hybrids now with more resistance to southern rust, and so it seems like we're seeing more and more rust a little bit every year at least, and so now we do have an option, especially in those southern counties where we seem to see it more consistently.
What level of protection do they offer?
That probably varies by hybrid, and so I think producers should work with their seed agronomists and talk to them about some of the problems that they experienced in those fields and see which ones would work best or fit best in those situations.
So should you look at it differently on your operation in terms of high-risk areas or areas that you're going to plant first or areas that have lodging problems? Tell me how you want people to look at this as they go about their seed corn selection.
Well, certainly we have high-risk production situations, and in many cases where we have pathogens that overwinter in crop debris, we have situations where continuous corn, minimum till, might put us at greater risk for disease development. And so in those situations it would be especially important, if you're coming back to corn again, to make sure and position a resistant hybrid there. Although crop rotation is still one of our best pest management strategies, some people are still using tillage, although that is not going to be applicable in every situation.
We saw a bacterial leaf streak in a lot of areas across the state this year. Is there anything producers can do to try to manage that problem?
Well, bacterial leaf streak was reported for the first time in the United States this year, and we have quite a bit of it spread across parts of Nebraska. At this time, we don't have any commercially available hybrids that are resistant to it that we know of. Some may react better than others, and so again, I would go back to your seed agronomist and have a discussion about what would be the best approach and which ones to position there. Otherwise, we've been using general management recommendations, coming back to that crop rotation and in rare cases maybe tillage.